everyone. I welcome you to another interesting session of Mendel's bicentenary celebrations. I'm glad to introduce myself. I am Mercy Rofina, a PhD student in Dr. Vinod Skaria's lab at CSIR IGIB. Today, here we have with us Dr. Analabha Basu, Associate Professor from the National Institute of Biomedical Genomics, NIBMG. His major research interests are focused in population genetics, admixture mapping, and genetic epidemiology. He's also got experience in handling students, teaching PhD students, and telling the importance of human genetics in research. So it's a pleasure to have you here for the discussion today, sir. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you so much for this. Right.
yeah, sir. So to begin with, it'll be great if you could elaborate in detail about your current research interests or what exactly your lab is currently working on.
Okay, so I'm a card-holding statistician. I have transformed from the subject of statistics into human genetics, where I work in the human genetics departments and then eventually joined the National Institute of Biomedical Genomics.
Okay.
So my research interests are nested in a sense that I have multiple interests, and some of these are interconnected. Uh, so there are two kinds to look at it. I mean, the major difference, I would say, is that I do two kinds of things. One is uh, analyzing real genetic data. Another part is developing methods for the analysis of data. So for the first part, I work on population genetics. I'm very interested and intrigued by history, demography, migration history of populations, with special emphasis on Southeast Asia. Uh, and it comes from prehistoric times still up to something which are very recent. And I use genetic data and genetic and different tools to try and tease out new events that has happened in history, or events that has happened in hasn't been discovered so far, or sometimes try and understand in greater details what is known in history. The other thing which I try and do is to look into natural history of diseases and to look into in finding genes for diseases, which is like genotypes with phenotypes, connecting genotypes. And for that as well, I take different kinds of approaches, largely statistical, but very recently, what my interests are in working with longitudinal data, where you follow up individuals over time, follow up individuals with different diseases over time, and also in application of the new machine learning, artificial intelligence kind of algorithms into different problems in genetics.
Okay. That was really interesting, sir. So, from whatever you have stated, like you told, you've been a statistician by education, and you had transitioned from being a statistician, and you're kind of in an interdisciplinary approach towards the human genetics field. So, from that perspective, what would you say is the importance for a student to adopt a transdisciplinary approach? Using multiple approaches of biosciences, like you being a statistician and also working in genetics, what would you say the importance of using such an approach?
I think that is primary, that is central today in most disciplines, at least definitely in genetics. Uh, so, uh, so I always tend to believe that genetics is extreme. Genetics is a physical science. I mean, it has. I mean, all of this is because of Mendel, because of our hero Mendel, uh, that it has a very well laid mathematical framework, a big mathematical framework on which this is, where you can calculate probabilities, where you can predict, where you can actually look into data and do things which uh, the physicists would envy,
Right.
which is it has such a wonderful and strong mathematical basis that that physicists would envy genetics. So I think genetics has always been like a physical science, one of the best disciplines in which interdisciplinary approaches is important, and that translates from physical science, biology to medicine to human health, psychology, ethics, and it's just fascinating. So and if you think of my major interests, so I work in population genetics, and my I'm interdisciplinary because I also work with history, I also work with archaeology, linguistics, and yeah, you name it, anthropologists. So I don't think any other discipline in the world which can be any more multidisciplinary. So that way, yes, it's multidisciplinary, of course, and its strength is in the fact that it's multidisciplinary.
Okay, that was a very unique and it was indeed a very insightful opinion about why it should be multidisciplinary and what's the importance of being genetics being multidisciplinary. So, sir, from your responses, so you've been working in population genetics. You get to see diseases that are prevalent in a particular population. And especially in case of genetic disorders, there is a stigma because of the fact that it's running in families. And you being in this field for quite some time, what do you think that should be an advancement or a future step to spread more awareness so that we can head towards the designing better health policies for a nation? Like, what do you think is that one step that is needed in our nation?
So I think my experience has been the major thing is to bring genetics or the knowledge of genetics to people, to common people,
Right.
and it's a responsibility for all of us, essentially, scientists, clinicians, students at every level, and journalists, people who really write, to introduce, introduce this to common public.
Right.
Uh, so genetic education, even in the clinical setup, you might be knowing that genetic counselors, for instance, genetic counselors, the proportion of genetic counselors that we have compared to the population size, that is going to be that if you do this, I do not know the numbers, but I can easily predict that will be terrible, that will be extremely low and very insufficient. So so the issue is that there is a dearth of people who really know this, who really know this and can engage with people, in people are general people and the society at large. So the point is that doing genetics, knowing that India has lots of subgroups, there is a lot of endogamy in our populations. We know for sure that there are genetic diseases prevalent everywhere. So there are many genetic diseases. Many of them will spread in certain populations, and of course we see some of these populations where we see specific diseases in very high frequency. So that is well known. But what is weak is we neither do have a proper epidemiological record. We do not have a very good conscious drive in keeping records, epidemiological records per se, in our hospitals, in our other setups. Uh, it's improving over time, but there is still a lot needs to be done, and counseling. So even normal clinicians whom I have seen oftentimes are not great. I mean, some of them are great clinicians, but some of them are not that good in identifying genetic diseases and disorders when they see people at the setup. So this is of course one aspect. I think this is the most important aspect. The other one is more technology, where we can possibly easier, possibly deeper tests, where we can then confirm whether these are genetic diseases and what kind of genes and might have been affected. And I also know, and I'm fortunate that there are some of these wonderful efforts where people are actually trying to get into genetics really curing diseases. At least they are giving trials of suppose of directly using genetics in trying to cure individuals' diseases.
True, true, sir. So, from the whatever aspects you have shared, so one of the points you had stated was the dearth of counselors who take the message to the public. So, I just wanted to share this one point for this series of interviews. When I was talking to clinicians, also one of the clinicians had stated one a unique idea of using nurses to train them as genetic counselors, so that we'll have a handful of number to take the message to the patients who are coming to visit the hospital. And whatever you have stated was in the same note, like we need more and more of genetic counselors who take the message. And from one of your other responses of saying that there's a growing interest in curing genetic diseases or kind of any diseases for that instance. So, on the same note, since you have also handled a lot of PhD students by now, so do you think there's an increasing interest in students? Is there a growth of students picking science, especially human genetics department? Like, is there an increase? Do you see an increase in interest in the young generation, sir?
Okay, so I think your two questions are considerably disjoint. I mean, but I do remember your first question, so I'll go the first question first. I think there has been many efforts, and some of these are wonderful in terms of trying to uh, reach people at the grassroots and trying to get health benefits to them. I mean, the efforts for suppose the polio vaccination, the efforts for the whole Asha movement, where people look for childbirth, etc., child nutrition. People come to these centers, and then there is tuberculosis, for instance, is one where people now go and apply this medicines at homes. I've seen this. I mean, I've gone for suppose sample collection somewhere in some remote populations, and I see that these some of these centers are there, and these people are active there. So, and many of these individuals have been trained in multiple ways, right? I mean, these are people who are from those locality oftentimes, and they have been trained in multiple ways. So if this if what you have tried to you have started in a sense, I mean, it's all part of those efforts where we try to popularize this, we try to spread it out, we try to spread this message out. So if this really goes widespread, so these people can be uh, taught considerably. Not that everybody will be a card holding genetic counselor, but they can be they can be taught to a level such that they can identify or at least suspect, looking at babies, that whether these babies have different genetic diseases or not. Now, if they even suspect, then that goes a long way, because that can set up this communication of somebody who's a real specialist with these people who are generally out of the big panopticon of this hospitals and these other health systems. So that way, I think that yes, so these are very important steps which people are trying to take, and if we can really imaginatively use this, there are some of these steps which are already in place, and genetics can also be introduced into some of these setups.
True.
Coming to the second question, I do see,
Okay.
excitement, and not only do I see excitement, I think the variety of interest with which now students come. is very different from suppose when I was a student.
Okay.
We were much more narrow. I mean, I don't have any qualms in stating this. We had a much more tunnel vision, but nowadays students come with much wider vision about uh, this. They are willing to take up challenges which are oftentimes beyond academics, partially beyond academics. And there has been successful programs like this running where these people go to say schools, try and educate young kids with genetics, whatever they have learned. So, for instance, in and around Kolkata, we have a small Kolkata CC huge Kolkata Center, Calcutta Center for Human Genetics, where there is a team, this team of PhD students who generally go to different schools and colleges, even to primary schools, and with the sole idea of getting genetics to schools. And that has been very successful as well. So yeah, I mean, interest has increased in this discipline, and I think it's all about if you can design this feedback loops where the interested people go back and interest more people, generate interest in more people. I think that'll be fascinating.
True, sir. Really true. Like the initiative taken by students to take the science, which is at a lab level, to a common ground. That's a great step to propagate the ideology more and more among the public. So this brings me to the end of this
You can
session.
start it at your center as well.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can start it at your center as well.
Actually, we have few outreach programs here, like where we go to the public schools and then like give them kind of few experiments which they can do like on the regular classroom so that they get more interested in science experiments, sir. So yeah, more and more should be done in any institute in India, I guess. So this brings me to the end of this session, sir, where in on this occasion, if you have any message, kind of like you clearly told that there is an increase in the interest among students in this particular discipline. So, if you'd like to share a kind of encouragement message or a kind of motivation message for young researchers who are in the field already or who is planning to take this field, what would your message be for students, sir?
I can't give you. I mean, I cannot give a message, but
Okay.
what I think is important in genetics is that suppose if you look back into the history of science. I mean, I'm interested in history, not necessarily in the history of science. I mean, but I'm generally interested in history. So if you look back, so the last century there was a huge excitement. Even I would say people were euphoric about physics. So, but the big problems in physics, many of these big problems in physics were sorted out, solved, and everybody, all large departments in universities were famous for the physics departments. There were many scientists who were physicists, and they did wonderful work. And people thought that problems of humanity will be solved physics, right? So there was huge excitement around this. Now is the time when all of this is around genetics. So what we think, I think, generally this is the perception that a lot of these problems that we are going to face in in in, in time, in health, in environment, in ecology, in climate change, the tools that we have are our understanding of genetics. So genetics is being used everywhere to solve any problem, and this is probably the opportunity for people who are interested in doing this. Is that it's a great time to be born at this time and do genetics.
Mm. Okay, that was like really a very, very encouraging point for all the youngsters who are planning to take science as their career, sir. So I'd like to thank you for joining this session and sharing your thoughts and opinions about the importance of this discipline and also what are all the future scopes for this discipline in our nation, sir. So thanks a lot for joining us today here. It's my pleasure to have you for the discussion
Thank you
today.
so much for taking this initiative.
Oh,
I love this. Thank you so much for taking this initiative of popularizing Mendel. Mendel is my hero, as I said, and I just love this. Thank you so much.
thanks a lot, sir.